Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to follow on from the work we did last week looking at the core structure of XML to now digging in a little deeper as to how you can leverage that inside of scripting. But before we get to that, I want to invite everybody, please, if you have any questions, any comments as we go along, just post them in the comments and we'll try to get to them live on air. Also, if you would like to call in and join us live on air, we have a link in the show notes here on the screen. So we'd love to have you, and somebody from the studio could get you on with us. Okay, so what I'm going to dive right in, because if you remember last week, we ended up sort of going through the entire structure of XML, and then we went into the vMix data model, which is also in XML, to sort of go through all the different aspects within vMix that you may want to be able to use in scripting. It sort of explained how that was translated into XML and how you could look at that to gather information. So I'd really like to pick up from that point and just carry this now into the scripting side of it. Actually, though, before we get to that, I know I have this here. We have a few comments. Phil's has sent us a hello that he's waiting. So, Phil's, thank you for joining us here. We have Dave Edwards. Dave, always good to see you here. Thank you. We have JP. JP, thanks for joining. And we have Vlad. Vlad, thank you. Always great to see you guys here. So I think where we sort of left off on our last show was talking about XPath. And we did that a little bit with going into how you could use that in Data Sources Manager to describe the information you want to see there. So if you remember, the basic model that is used for XPath is that you are basically walking down the XML tree. So the XML is sort of layered trees where it's got a hierarchy. There's a root node and then child nodes under that, and that can go in as deep as necessary. So that is basically what you're seeing described in XPath. It starts with the root node and then moves in to the subsequent child nodes inside of the XML base. And what this will get you to is this will point you to the first element that matches that path. So this will basically point you to the first input element, which is under the inputs element, and that's under the root element of vMix. But say you wanted to look for specific details within an element before selecting that. So for instance, you wanted an element, but only one that had a certain name or had a certain type. You can do that. Inside of XPath, there's a whole construct for searching or for sort of pruning through nodes. And what you'll see is, as opposed to just having the vMix inputs/input, and that's sort of the XPath, you can actually add a conditional criteria on the end. And so that's how you do this in square brackets and then some condition that needs to be met. And what this will do is this will go in and it will find all of the inputs that are under the inputs vMix tree path that are of type NDI. Now, if you remember, in last week's show, we talked about that you can have things that are called attributes as well as values inside of elements. So an element can have attributes, and then an element also has a value. All of this is text. So when you have this @ sign with a name, that is the name of the attribute that we're looking for. And by having this equals quote NDI, what it's looking for, in this case in vMix very specifically, would be all of the inputs that are in vMix that originate from an NDI source. And in vMix, in the input elements inside of vMix, it will say type equals NDI for all the NDI sources. So this just lets us go and say, I have all these inputs. I just want the ones that are coming in via NDI. So that's one mechanism. The next is you could actually search for the text inside the element. So inside vMix, if you have an input, what you actually have as the value inside that input element is the name of the input. So whatever title you gave that. And so I could have searched for this by sort of @title equals avatar, but you can say where text with sort of a parenthetical after it equals avatars. That's just saying if the value of this element equals avatar, I want to see that. So that's another way. So one was for the attribute. The next is for the element inside. But you can actually do things that are even more complex. So say you were looking for something that had an element that only contained some text. You're looking for some string inside that element to know. So say you had tag inputs that were all titled, team A and team B, but with the person's name after it. You can turn around and say, I'm only looking for inputs that contain team A, and you'll get all of them, every team A and each player name. So you can do things like that, where that's how it is constructed. And that can even get more complicated, where you can go in and say, I want to do things where I have broader numbers of conditionals. So it contains the text person And so that's like Boolean and. They both have to be true. So this is true, and it contains the text male. That's also true. So this means that what you're essentially doing is you're navigating to a point in the XML tree, and from there, you're saying, I only want the elements at that point in the XML tree that have this whole search expression in here resolving to true. So this can be complicated. You can have things where it contains, it starts with, you can have ands and ors, you can have parentheses to say, I want this and this, or this and this. So lots of different ways, but this is giving you that walk through the XML and then giving you the criteria to say, this is how I want to extract that. And that's really foundationally how almost all of the searching is going to take place here when we work with the XML and scripting. And this is really how we're going to be doing this. This is our pruning mechanism. So what I'd like to do now is let me sort of jump over to vMix for a second, and we'll take a look at this very simple preset that I put together inside of vMix. So what I wanted to do was do something where I could show different ways that you can search within this very small set of inputs. And I think this will help get us through sort of understanding the scripting side of this. So we have one, which is just a video which can loop, called background, one called avatar, which is just a still, and then we have two NDI inputs here, one called person bracket female, and the other called person bracket male. So this just gives us, a basic set of inputs. And then I have this layered input that I'm going to sort of leverage after I go through this to give you a sense of how we can do stuff. So with that in mind, that's a fairly simple, a fairly simple preset here. Let's jump over to some scripting, and I'm going to show you how you can start to walk through this set of presets and find different presets specifically in code. So we have upfront things that we declare. So the thing that's most important, so let's start there, is that we talked about this last week. We have an XML node and we have an XML node list. And an XML node is sort of from an open element to a closed element and the values in between. So that's considered a node in XML. Nodes can be nested, but it's just a node. You can also have something called a node list, which basically is a collection of nodes that you put together in a list and can index to it one item at a time. So that's the second sort of collection model that you can use for extracting XML. And so I have some of those set up. We have some strings and integers, things that we're just using to manipulate. But what I really like to get into now is just jumping into how we access the XML piece. So in vMix, this is something that everybody has seen probably in almost every single script we've put together, is we create an XML document inside of .NET and we load it with the vMix XML. So we call it vMix XML, and then one of the things you can execute on that is a load XML where I point to the source of that. And in vMix, that's the vMix API. So that pulls that in. So what we've done is we've now taken that whole XML and we pulled it in to the system in a document called vMix XML. So that's really where we're starting. And that pulls that in. From there, we can start to do things with it. So I have a lot of console write lines because I put this together so when you run it, you could see outputs. So we're going to sort of skip through some of that, but there's key points I want to pull out in it. So if we want to get a single input, that's basically an XML node, not a list, just a single node. What I can do is I can turn around and say, go to my vMix XML document that we just opened up and pulled into the system. And I can say, select a single node And what I'm doing now is I'm taking the XPath that I had and I'm basically putting that in there as the way to say, this is the single node that I want you to get. So you can see this is exactly what we had there, where it's input, where the title, which is an attribute, is set to avatar. And so we pulled that in. Keep in mind that when I access this as select single node, what it's going to do, it's going to give me the first instance that it finds in XML. So if I had 3 elements that match this, 3 XML nodes that were an exact match for this, I'll only see the first one. So that's something to keep in mind. So now that I have this single input sitting over here, what can I do with it? Well, I can start to pull the values out of it. So if I want to look at what that input looks like, there are 2 properties that it has. I can go and say, I can take the outer XML, which is going to say, take the entire block of XML with the elements, all the attributes, the value in the middle, and then the closing element on that. And that's what's called the outer XML. I can also take what's called the inner XML, and that's just the value inside of that. So in many cases, you are probably not going to want to look at the outer XML. There may be reasons, but typically not. What you're going to want to do is you want to pull the value out. If I'm asking for something, it's probably because I want a value. So you do something called inner XML. And what that will do is that will give you the inner values. So I printed out some of the console stuff here. So you can see, let me see if I can just do this to word wrap on. So you can see. So here is I got the input of the name avatar. And now the outer XML that I was talking about is this entire input. So this is what the outer XML is. And you can see it's got everything that would be in that. The inner XML is just avatar, which if you look, that's this bit right here. That's the value that's contained within that XML element. And this is what we went through last week with understanding the XML structure. So that's just the element that we got there. So that's the first thing when you start to think about how you work with XML, is that you can pull a single node, and when you pull that node and have it there, you can look at its value, the inner XML, or you can look at the entire structure of it, which is the outer XML. So let me switch back here now. So once I have this, though, now what I can do is I can come back and say, I want to get stuff about this now. So I have the single input now that we're going to do. Let's update this a little bit. So I want to go here and I want to say, I'm going to select the same single node before, but what I'm looking for now is an attribute with the get named item number. So I'm now telling it, yes, take that node I just found. And I'm actually looking a little deeper. I'm looking at one of the attributes in that, which is the input number. So this is a perfect example where I was looking for an input named avatar, and I found that. But now what I'm saying is, give me that input number, because maybe I want to use it to execute a function. I want to set a layer. I want to change something in it. This now is how I can take and go that next level down. I'm just using it and looking for attributes and get named item, which is just the name of the attribute. So get me that. And again, we still have the same inner and outer XMLs. So if I sort of pop over here, we're now in this one, you can see that this is the number where I say, give me the get attribute by name number. This is the outer XML, and that's the inner XML. So again, you see sort of the pattern emerging here. This is exactly how all of this would work. So that's sort of the next level down. Once you pull and find an input, now you can start to pull pieces of that input out to leverage them. And so that's really what I wanted to do as the first piece. I'm just working with a single node, XML node, and I'm pulling pieces out of it, because that's sort of the core of everything. Ultimately, even when you have lists, you're working with these lists one XML node element at a time. And so that's how you pull that out. So The next thing we're going to do now is go into where this really shines, where you can get huge amounts of value out of scripting. And that's using node list. So if you want a node list, you don't really do anything that's different in the search. But as I mentioned, when you do it for like select single node, it just gives you the first one. When you do what you see here, select nodes, it's going to give you an XML node list with all of the ones that match. So right here, I'm saying, give me all of the inputs, all of the XML nodes that match type NDI. And so we have two of them. When I went through the vMix, there was the number 3 and number 4 inputs, the person female, person male that we sort of set up. And that's how we're pulling this in. But now, when we do this query, we have an XML node list. I have multiple XML items here. And one of the things you know is there's always properties that I can get of things. So if I have an XML node list, one of the properties of that node list, so this is NDI inputs, is my XML node list. So my XML nodes, there's a property called count. And so what I can do is I could say, how many nodes did I find that are NDI? And that's, so I just go to the NDI inputs node list and say, give me a count of how many elements you have in you. And that's how you can sort of now work with it, because I know how many I have to look through. So in this case, I have 2. And so what I'm doing here now is saying, okay, I'm going to do something we've seen, the for loop, where I'm just going to loop through, and I'm going to start sort of at 0, which a lot of things in programming are 0-based, not 1-based, and go to, the count -1. So I'll go show me item 0, show me item 1. That's basically how this works here. So I'm going to now, if you see, remember I said everything rolls back to the ability to work with single nodes. That's exactly what I'm doing here. So in this loop, I'm going through my NDI inputs node list, and I'm saying I want to work with it one at a time. So I pull each one of these out as a single node. And the way you do that is you take this, and you can take another property, which is item, and say, okay, that's going to be, give me this one item in the list. So the list has multiple node items. And I want which one? I want the 0th, or the first one that's in the list. And so I take a node list and I pull it into a single node based on which element in the list I want. And so that's, again, just a very straightforward way to think of this as, going from single to list and pulling that out. And then I can do anything I want out of this. I talked about, the ability to pull attributes, get named items, any of that stuff. Now I have access to all those values. So if you are looking at something and you say, okay, I want to pull out the input number, the input key, I want to know, is it muted? All that information is sort of sitting in each one of these inputs now. And you have access to all of that, but just by saying, I want the title, I want mute, which will be true, false, any of those things. And I just pull those out as values. And that's another thing. So when I go and get a named item, I can go and say, give me the value of that named item. And that's just a text string with that value. So hopefully this is starting to make sense. And that's all we do through the rest of this scripting here. So I'm going in here and I'm doing things where I want the text to match avatar. Same thing. Select nodes, get the count, go through it and do something with it. Here is where, if I come down here, I want all the inputs that contain the text person. That's the other thing I showed at the beginning. So you can see it's all I'm really doing here is I'm just changing that XPath inside the same core structure. And so when I put that together, your XPath now is saying, what is it that I'm pulling out? But manipulating that list, once I create that node list, manipulating it is identical no matter how I did that search. So it becomes very simple. You basically use XPath to create the search creates the node list, and then all the functionality to work with single nodes as you loop through them lets you do everything you want. And there's not a whole lot more I want to go through on the vMix XML side. But what I do want to talk about is that these things that we're looking at, I was just using the vMix XML as an example. But if you want, you can work with XML out of your own files as well. In the beginning, we did the load using the vMix, I think it's vmix.api or api.xml. So that's what we use to load it for the vMix. Here, I'm just going to open a file, but it's the same thing. So if you can see, what I'm doing is I'm saying I'm creating an LTA XML. So this would be our live to air metadata file. I'm just saying create a new document. And then as opposed to doing, because I don't have just a XML API, I actually have to do a file stream, which basically I'm going to read a file. So I say create a new file stream, which is the XML path and how I want to open it. Now, we don't have to go into details, but these things are all well documented, so based on how you want it to. But this is just the full path of the XML file I want to read. And then I go LTA XML load file stream. And if you remember, the other, we were just loading the API from vMix. But it's the same thing at this point. Now, everything here works identically. You're doing select single nodes, select nodes. You're parsing it all the same way, but now with your own XML file. So that's another way that you can start to leverage all of this inside of scripting. So that's the core scripting part. I think we have a few more comments that I want to get to, but that basically talks through the core script-based elements that should get you started working with XML and the vMix XML model. So let me see, who else do we have here? Oh, Multimedia Max from Belgium. Great to have you here. It's always good to see you. Thank you. So we have, hopefully I say your name, Bakary. So Bakary, thank you for joining us from Gambia. That is really great that you're taking your Friday night to do this. I appreciate it. So Automation, thank you for joining us. Always good to see you here. So, and we have Samuel Nordic. Hello, thank you for joining us from Norway. Great to have you. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to do was to talk a little bit about how you could leverage this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the output of vMix for a moment here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you what I'm doing from the scripting point of view applied to something sort of semi-real world here. So what I set up here was a MultiView. And I have things set up where if I press a key, let me get over here. If I press a key, I can turn around and have it pull in different things based on the XML that we're reading. So in the first case, I said, give me everything that has people in the title. And I just have this MultiView there. I can turn around and say, give me everything that has people or avatars. So now it's just going through and it's pulling out all the inputs with either avatar or with people. I can do things where I say, I'm just looking for people female or people male, and I can do this. But if you think about the use cases here, this is stuff where I had like with Team A and Team B, where you could just take and do this from a single input and just change what you're showing in the layers. And with vMix 27, because you have more API controls over the layout of these layers, where you position things, you now could turn around and say, I will use count to say, how many boxes do I need? Do a little math to size them. And then I could just turn around and say, okay, to show Team A, I need a 3 box. To show Team B, I need a 4 box. And I just have rules for how I do those layouts. And you'll know these things through the counts. So really cool stuff. And I mean, I'll just show you, what we did here for, let me see, the people plus the avatar. So I have this little script here. And this is basically just leveraging the exact same stuff we showed before. This is the XPath that we use to find it, where it says it contains the text person or it contains the text avatar. So that's how we got both inputs. Then all I'm doing is I clear out my MultiView input with all the layers. And I then go through and I say, let's work through this. And for each item that I have, I'm turning around and saying, let me get the input number for it. And I'm using that with this function to set the layer. So I'm saying take and set, based on that's the loop. So I'm going from 0, 1, 2, 3. So I sort of add 1 to it. So take the value that is layer 1, 2, 3, or 4, and assign it input number. So this is just it's a simple example, but it gives you a sense of the power that sort of sits behind this. Where now when you look at it, you're no longer seeing it just as, this big block of data, but now you can start to decompose it and think about how you leverage this to do things inside your session. And this is just one very basic example, but I think you can start to think for yourself around all different ways you could apply this to your own productions. So I think that's hopefully gave you that next level down. Okay, so I know this wasn't a very long show, but I just wanted to make sure that I didn't distract by having too many side things going on in this show, and that you could really, get to look at it in a very linear context around what we can do with this. So what I'm going to do is we will wrap up the show and move to the post show. But wanted to let everybody know, thank you for joining us, because I know we weren't sure we were making it this week. Next week, on Tuesday, we are going to be going to the NAB show in New York. So if there's any places you wanted to see, any vendors that you wanted us to visit, we will be sharing all of that on next Friday's show. So please, if you have things you'd like us to check out while we're there for you, just let us know, and we'll ask the questions or take the pictures or videos of things that we see there that we think are pretty cool, and we'll share that all next Friday. So if you can hang around for the post show, I'd love it. It would be great. We can talk about anything you want. If you can't, thank you for joining, and I will see you next Friday. If not, I'll see you in a minute. All right. Welcome to the post show, everyone. So, Vlad, thank you for joining, Vlad. It is great having this sort of feedback, because I know the reason I decided to do these shows, let me sort of center myself a little better here. The reason I decided to do these shows, these two shows, is because I got a lot of feedback from people that we would sometimes sort of just run ahead into these scripting things, but didn't have really a whole lot of foundational content to get people that weren't as familiar on some of the technical aspects of the script to get them on board too. So hopefully this, combined with the original two scripting shows that we did, gosh, that's probably season 2, that would, that will be helpful in getting people on. But what I'm looking for really is to make sure that we can bring everybody aboard that wants to. So if you have other foundational topics that you're looking for us to cover, please just share that, in comments, or, direct message me on Facebook, or send us email, and we'll make sure we cover that. So some of the things that we were doing with this, that I wanted to make sure we covered, and that's why I sort of pointed to some of the stuff with the live to air, is that if you remember a few weeks ago, we did the show where we had guests that could like vote on, they agreed or disagreed with something. This is exactly the sort of thing where you could use that sort of deeper dive, where you could sit there and go, I have a group of people, but then I'm adding metadata on top of that, like the agrees or disagrees or any of that. And from that, I'm taking some sort of visual action on screen. So I need to use functions around that to go and trace that back to, you know, who, who said yes, who said no, and how do I want to display that on the screen. So it's things like that where I think it could be really, really interesting. And, this is things you could put in with your own data. So you can create your own XML tables for different things that you want, and leverage those in a production. It could drive a production. In fact, if you start to think about it, you could turn around and have timers and everything else that you wanted to say. This is the next thing that I want to do, and it could all be described in XML and be read and executed as a series of functions inside a script. And so you could do it almost like segments, where I say I'm doing segment 1, and it would just do everything you needed to configure in segment 1, and then segment 2, so on. So interesting use cases around that as well, where you could use it for things that maybe aren't directly visual, but that are really controlling the flow of a production. And if you have that ability to read the XML, that's great. The other thing, which we did a little bit with, last season, is something like Node.js. You can, in Node.js, I probably recommend going with JavaScript as opposed to XML, but some of the same concepts would apply, where you're just working with things that you're reading information and then using that information to generate different types of actions around that. So that's really it. If you guys have any other questions or want me to dig into anything, just post it here now. But we're actually pretty excited about seeing what's out at NAB in New York this year, because it's been a while. I think this will be our first New York one, in a few years. And we're in the area, but it's just there, it's been, with everything going around and all of the lockdowns they've had with things, we really haven't had a good opportunity to visit. So this will be our first visit back in a while. We had somebody there last year in one of the booths, which was great, and we really appreciate that. It was actually with Varto Technologies. So those are great guys. So if you're at NAB, definitely stop by and say hello from us. But if you are going to be at NAB, let me know, because I definitely, wouldn't mind, trying to meet up and say hi. So that's something else. So Vlad's saying he was hesitant to relearn scripting before. But I think, Vlad, every level of scripting there, you can get into doing some basic stuff. And I think that's the key piece. Just decide what it is you need. You can, inside just like the script start dynamic, which is just one of the built-in, you can do very simple things. So, definitely things to do, to learn. And, just pick up what makes sense for you, try it, and keep going. It's a great way to really up your productions. So I'm told we have a caller, Samuel. So, Samuel, are you there?
Yes, I am. So
Hi.
I've been watching your shows for probably a couple of years now, and I've been working a little bit on some XML. So I thought perhaps I would show a little bit of what I've been working on since last week.
Sure.
I've been working a little bit different than what you've done, but you see I've got some inputs here.
Yeah, let me see if
so
I can
actually-
get you full screen here. There we go. Yeah.
Cool. So if you see here, I've got a XML that will modify the vMix preset. because what I've been trying to do is make an easy way for people to change the input of a vMix preset without needing to go in and changing it in the interface in vMix. So I've got three variables here for the path for the video I want to load, and for the vMix preset, and then the start time of the video.
Yep.
Then here I'm doing kind of the same thing as you did today. I'm not really a programmer like you are, but I like tinkering around with it. So I'm loading the input, finding the input, and then placing the path into the vMix preset. So I'll do a little demo here. Here I've got this video in vMix.
Yep.
And then I'll run the script here and update the. It's important to note that this isn't live in vMix. You have to load the XML into vMix.
Yep.
So you see now I updated the video with the time, and then perhaps I want to change the set it to 4 minutes and go back. And then you see it doesn't go exactly because of the compression, but it's like almost. So that's what I've been working on. That's the concept of my program. And then I made this little interface in AutoHotkey.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And, like I can just load like the file into the preset, and then I can set like the start time, and then start it, and then it will open into vMix.
So, I mean, what you're doing then is you're modifying the preset file itself, not the vMix XML, and then you're loading that in. Yep. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's actually very cool, Samuel. Thanks for sharing that, because I think this gives people. There is another level down in vMix. We really haven't gotten into decomposing presets. This is really the vMix XML we look at as state. But yeah, that next level down, that gives you a sense of some of the things that you can do. And that is really, really powerful, because, if you have that, go ahead.
You have access to all the settings loaded into the preset. But the one thing important to note is that it's not possible to modify it while vMix is running a show or something. You have to do it to load it into the preset, and then the preset loads into vMix. If you get what I'm saying, I'm sure you understand what
Yep. So yeah, because I mean that's vMix reads that and then it's loaded. So it's I'm sure just an in-memory image of the preset, and then it's sort of you can't just play with that in memory. Oh, you probably could, but that would be a lot of fun trying to blow it up. But if you did it right in memory, well, but I'm sure it's this model I think is great, because there is a lot of value to it. If you want to use something to set up a type of production where you have a similar template, but you're going to have unique assets, this could be something you could actually use to have an XML file to say, here's all the assets that I need for this type of production, read them in, create the preset based on that, and then open the preset in vMix, and you're set for that class of production. So I could see lots of use cases for that approach as well. So it was really nice that you put a UI on it too, where you turned around and said, yeah, I just put a little front end to do stuff, because, most of the time we just use the console to do that. So always good to see that too.
But the use case for this is like, it's like a church, and they often want to load a specific video in and start at a specific time. And what I've done, I've set up a whole bunch of triggers on the video to do different functions in vMix.
Yep.
And then I don't want an inexperienced volunteer to start messing with and trying to change the video.
Yep.
And you know how that can go.
Yep.
It can mess up the whole thing. So this is like a way for him to load it into vMix. And actually, the older vMix, like before 25, then you could just remove the video file But and then you could it was just like a placeholder, and then when you open vMix, then it would just come up as if to browse for the file.
Yep.
But they added some new functionality into vMix 25 that broke this here. So the main reason I did this because I want to update to vMix 27 because we're still running 24 in this place.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool things in vMix 27 too. So yeah, this is that is really great. I appreciate you sharing that. That's always fun to see what people are doing. So yeah, and this is for everybody else that's out there. If you are if you're doing stuff, please share it because I think we all learn from each other, and there's a level of inspiration you get from seeing what other people do and go like, oh, I could use that but do it this way. And so I love seeing this stuff. So thank you, Samuel.
Thank you for having me.
All right, you take care. Be well.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. All right, that was great. Thank you, Samuel. Really appreciate seeing that. So let's see. So we have Ednut from Gaza. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. So let's see. We have Vlad is saying, what are you planning to ask the vMix guys when you meet them at NAB? I actually, more than anything, just want to say hello. I mean, I think the 27 has got a lot of cool things in it. If I have anything that I'd really want to touch on, it would be some of the the performance things behind that. What you can do programmatically to change values. How quickly could you change position across the screen without it becoming a detriment to the way the program works. So it's things like that where I think there's a lot of cool new capabilities on the scripting API side. And so if I'm asking them anything, it's going to be much more around that sort of lower level. How do you leverage the capability without overloading the system? So they're a good bunch of guys there. So yeah, Dave is saying it helps to have a community to work with. And so yeah, I agree, Dave. Everything, it seems like everything that I've enjoyed doing in life was motivated by somebody else's, something they were trying to do that I could see something in, or something that they did that I wanted to modify. So yeah, totally agree. It's great to have that sort of community. So thank you for being part of it. So Bakary, how can I use the iPhone as a tracking device in vMix? Okay, so I'm not 100% sure. If you're asking for getting coordinate information where you can sort of turn around and say, if I am using it as a camera, but I want to know, the orientation of the camera. So is it pitched or is it, rotated? So that sort of thing. That information is available. There is a whole gyroscopic piece in that, but it's not something that you can just easily pull out. So I don't have a good answer for you for that. Though I know there is software specifically where people have put, their iPhones on top of a camera and use software to turn around and sort of say, tell me based on how I've moved or pitched or rotated, that would give you that, that information. I don't have a specific software package that I've looked at that I could tell you about, but I do know they exist. So that definitely is something. If I come across it, I'll let you know. But give me a second, make a note. So, I mean, the other thing is there's something called, I believe it's called FreeD or Free 3D. I'm not remembering exactly, which is in a lot of PTZ cameras. I know that PTZ Optics has added that to theirs. So this is something you could definitely leverage for knowing where the orientation of the camera is in 3D space and leveraging that. So that may be helpful as well. But I've made a note, and if I come across something, I will post it to the group. So thank you, Bakary. Martin, great to see you, Martin. Thank you for joining from Vienna. So it is great to see sort of the people from so many different locations as part of this community. So thank you, Martin. Great to have you here. So do I have a forum thread in the vMix forums website? No, I don't actually have something set up. We do have a vMix scripting group on Facebook, as well as the Streaming Alchemy group. So sort of two different groups that I usually leverage. But if there's specific topics on the vMix forum that you would like me to sort of post, I've always looked at it more as a place where people ask questions and then respond. So, but if there's something specific you had in mind, I'd be happy to to add something there as well. Okay, so let's see. All right, so I think this has been great. I really appreciate the question and the feedback. If you want me to check out anything when the team and I are at NAB, just post it in comments here or post it in the Streaming Alchemy group, and we'll pick that up and we'll try to get that wrapped up for you for a show next week. But we are probably at a good break point for this show. So thank you, everybody. I look forward to, if any of you are out at NAB, just, give us a shout and we'll try to set up a time. Yadnet asked, could you show an example of using XPath to create XML node lists based on an attribute value? How would this be applied in scripting a dynamic multi-view in vMix? So what I did right here. So actually, I'll just switch over to what I have sitting here in the scripting here. So let me see if I can pull this up here. Basically, what I have here is an example of something that's using XPath to create an XML node list with specific, in this case, it's text. But if I wanted to, I could have just turned around and said, let me see if I could do something like this would look like at title, I believe, equals. All right. Yeah. So that isn't exactly correct because it's, this would be, so it'd be at title. So, sorry, it's just this. So it'd be at title person. And this is saying find any inputs that where the title contains person or the title text contains avatar. But that's exactly how you would do that. And once I have that, I have a list of inputs that match that. And what I do right here is I loop through those inputs to leverage them in making function calls to do the multi-view. So this is actually all posted up on the drive that we shared for this show. So you should be able to take and play with all of this yourself and hopefully get it to work exactly as you need it. So, okay, hopefully that helped. So, all right, everybody. Thank you very much. If I see you at NAB, that'd be great. If not, I will see you next Friday. Until then, be safe, be well. Bye.